Hello and welcome. You are watching Freeology Revision. In today's video, we are looking at AQA Psychology, Paper 1. Topic 1, Attachment. There are a few theories of how and why attachments form. In this video we will be discussing the learning theory of attachment. Learning theory and behaviorism is something we cover in the approaches topic, so be sure to check out our video on that if you want more information about it. Learning theory proposes that all behavior is learned, not inborn. Infants are blank slates, and so everything they become and all of the behavior they display throughout their lives can be explained in terms of the past experiences they've had. Behaviorists suggest that all behavior, including attachment, is learned either through classical or operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is learning through association, and was first demonstrated by Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov showed that dogs could be conditioned to salivate at the sound of a bell if that sound was repeatedly presented at the same time that they were given food. First, the dogs were presented with the food. They salivated. The food was the unconditioned stimulus and salivation was an unconditioned, innate, response. Then, Pavlov sounded the bell, a neutral stimulus, before giving them food. After a few pairings, the dogs salivated when they heard the bell even when no food was given. The bell had become the conditioned stimulus and salivation had become the conditioned response. The dogs had learned to associate the bell with the food and so salivation was triggered by the sound of the bell. Classical conditioning can be applied to attachment in the following way. Attachment can be explained through an association between the mother and food. The innate stimulus is food. Food produces the innate, unlearned, response of pleasure. In this case, food is unconditioned stimulus, and pleasure is our unconditioned response. During the infant's early weeks of life, certain things become associated with food because they are present at the time the infant is fed. For example, the mother, a chair, certain sounds. All of these things are called neutral stimuli. If any neutral stimuli is consistently associated with an unconditioned stimulus, food, then it too will start to produce the same response. The person who feeds the infant becomes associated with the food and so becomes a conditioned stimulus. Just seeing this person gives the infant a feeling of pleasure, a conditioned response. This newly formed stimulus response is called cupboard love. Attachment can also be learned by operant conditioning. This is when behavior is learned through consequences. Reinforcement increases the likelihood of an individual performing a behavior, and punishment makes it less likely. Dollard and Miller, 1950, used the term secondary drive hypothesis to describe the processes of learning and attachment through operant conditioning. Secondary drive hypothesis explains how primary drives which are essential for survival, such as eating when hungry, become associated with secondary drives such as emotional closeness. A drive motivates behavior. For example, hunger. The sensation of hunger creates discomfort, which motivates an individual to find food in order to reduce said discomfort. When an infant is fed, the discomfort of hunger is taken away. This is a negative reinforcement, as something unpleasant has been taken away. They also experience pleasure from being fed. This is a positive reinforcement, as something good is gained. Both of these lead to infants being more likely to choose to be fed in the future because it is rewarding. Food becomes a primary reinforcer, in that it directly reinforces the behavior of feeding. Meanwhile, through classical conditioning, the person who supplies the food becomes associated with feeding and so becomes what is known as a secondary reinforcer. Attachment occurs because the child seeks the person who can supply the reward. Finally, let's talk about social learning theory. Bandura agreed with the behaviorists that behavior is learned through experience. However, he proposed a different mechanism than conditioning. He argued that we can also learn through observation and imitation of a model's behavior. Dale Hay and Joe Vespo, 1988, suggested that parents act as role models. Children observe their parents' affectionate behavior and imitate it. Furthermore, parents also deliberately instruct their children about how to behave in relationships and reward appropriate attachment behavior such as smiling, giving kisses, gifts and hugs.